My name is Daniel John Donnellon Jr., or as I've been called since birth, DJ, because, it makes the initials DJ, DJ. And so obviously I was named after my father, Daniel John Donnellon Sr., and it is in his honor that I make this video today, because he recently passed away. And yeah, that's sad. He died, yeah. So that sucks, yeah. And we were really close, and so I'm sad about that. And I wanted to make this video about this little speech I wrote in his honor, because it was actually so you usually give a eulogy at the funeral, right? And this was kind of what I wrote this for, but he had his funeral at a Catholic church, and they only allowed one person to give the eulogy up in front of the church at the service. And so my oldest sibling was the one who got to do that. But I wrote this thing out, and I wanted to share it with people because it mostly just means a lot to me to share these words I wrote about my dad. So hopefully maybe some people will listen and watch it. If not, I get to just make the video anyways. So, My dad and I are really close. We had a lot of good times together, especially after I graduated college, moved back in at home. We'd go on trips, we'd go to concerts, we'd go to a lot of football games. He actually really introduced me to football, basically, as many dads do with their sons. And I really got interested in football because of him, and it was a big part of our bonding together. We would frequently watch the Bengals and the Buckeyes games and the Bearcat games and other kind of football teams we really liked, and we'd watch those, and it was really a good moment for us. It was kind of our father-son bonding thing, watching the football games and everything and cheering on our teams. And, I'll never forget watching the Ohio State Buckeyes win the national championship with him when I was just 11 years old, back from the 2002 season when they won it. They beat Miami Hurricanes in double overtime. And my dad and I were watching the game. He let me stay up and watch it. And because it was the championship, hello. And although I don't remember what my bedtime was then, but that's not an important detail. So we were watching the game, and I'll never forget, we were watching it, just me and him, and we were holding hands. It was a close game. It was a really good game. It was a Fiesta Bowl back in 2002. You can look it up. And I think it was the Fiesta Bowl. It was a national championship of whatever. It doesn't matter. Again, useless detail. So we were watching the games, and I just remember we were holding hands. We were so close. It was overtime, and then we were clutching tires, and won the double overtime, and we won the game. And it was really fun. And I knew from that season and that game, watching them win the championship, that I wanted to go to The Ohio State University. And that was kind of what I had my heart set on ever from kind of that moment. And I did. And I had a great time there, and I graduated from there. And so, I have a lot to thank for my dad for kind of helping me build that kind of loyalty and getting my heart set on Ohio State. And I had a great experience there. I wouldn't change it for anything. So, and as much as we were college football fans, which was quite a bit, we were even bigger NFL fans. And this season, we got to see our beloved Cincinnati Bengals finally make it to a Super Bowl for the first time in, 33 years? And it was awesome. And it was actually, not only was the first time I got to see them play in the Super Bowl in my lifetime, it was actually the first time I've ever got to see them win a playoff game. And it was kind of a bittersweet moment as I was there at the game with my buddy Brian in my dad's season tickets, with my dad's seats, in his seats with his season tickets, right? And, we watched Jermaine Pratt pick off Derek Carr to seal the victory and get the Bengals their first playoff win in over 31 years. And it was awesome, but it was a bit of a bittersweet moment for me because I couldn't be there with my dad. I mean, that's who would have gone to the game with me. He would have taken me to the game because they were his seats. But he couldn't make it because he was too sick. And so it was a bittersweet moment. I mean, I had no idea how exactly bad his sickness would get at that point. Yeah, but at that point he was really sick. I don't think he was in the hospital quite yet at that point. But he went to the hospital, came home, and then had to go back to the hospital, and then he died at the hospital. But, either way, he couldn't make it to that game because he was too sick to go. And I think he was in the hospital at that point. And then he got out. So it was just a bittersweet moment because he was in the hospital and couldn't make it to the game with me. And that was a lot of our bonding was through football and watching the Bengals win the first game of my life, first playoff game of my life was sure something. I'm 30 now. And, I was 30 then too. I'll be 31 soon, but these are not important details. So, yeah. And then actually, so he was at the hospital for that game. Because then my last memory of him ever at home was actually watching the Bengals beat the Titans for the AFC divisional round. And it was that game where, this was his last time at home, he got rushed off to the hospital immediately after that game. Had that game not have been on, he probably would have been in the hospital before. But he really wanted to watch the game with me at home. We want to watch the game at home. I could be there with him to watch it, and it meant a lot. He couldn't make it down to the man cave he had built in the basement with the giant 13-foot projection screen, so we just had to watch it on the little old big screen TV upstairs. But that was still nice, yeah. Yeah, and it was, I'm glad Evan McPherson made that kick because the game might have gone into overtime. Well, the game would have gone into overtime if he wouldn't, and I don't know if my dad would have made it that far. But of course, what difference would it make? Because he ended up dying anyways. Yeah, okay. So it was just, we had a lot of those moments. That was my last memory, was with him watching the Bengals beat the Titans. Last memory at home, watching the Bengals beat the Titans, because then he was rushed off to the hospital immediately after. And then my last memory of him ever really actually talking to him was when he was at the hospital. And we watched the Bengals beat the Chiefs in the AFC Championship. And it was reminiscent because that game was another really close one. Just like we did with the Buckeyes back in 2002, we were holding hands near the end. And we got to watch Evan McPherson make the game-winning kick in overtime. Then we got to shout and scream at everybody, the Bengals are going to the Super Bowl! And it was really cool. That was my last memory ever really talking to him, because shortly after that, he ended up getting rushed down to the ICU. So he was in the normal hospital at this point. And then he was taken to the ICU later that week, into which he was put on a ventilator and sedated, so he couldn't talk to you. I visited him a few times when he was in the ICU, but he was completely sedated. It was just like he was sleeping, right? And then it was awkward. He was all weird looking and had this big tube shoved down his throat. It was not a fun sight. Yeah. And then so I really learned a lot from my dad with how he treated the Bengals. Because, as I said, the Bengals won their first playoff game this year in my lifetime of 30 years. Just this year. And so we weren't always super good when I was growing up. But my dad was so loyal to the Bengals no matter what. He had season tickets at old time. Never left early. Always cheered on his team. Never said a bad word against them. I mean, there were plenty of bad words said during the game, but not about the team itself. He was always loyal. He never turned against them, never said anything bad. And I learned a lot about that loyalty and dedication, that you always support your team, your endeavors, no matter what. And you take that pride in what you have. And You don't just give up and you don't just disregard your team and your town. You have that. You don't quit. You stay with it. And that, it's just a little thing and, extrapolated from it. But that was it. It's a lot of that intangible qualities, and it really showed kind of the man he was. And really, I'd say the only thing he was more loyal to than the Cincinnati Bengals was to God and my family. He was a great family man and a very religious man. And a lot of my philosophical and spiritual views were shaped by that. We used to go to church every Sunday and, and try to live and honor God's message every day. And while I got really into philosophy and questioned a lot of what I was told growing up, I wanted to question everything. And so, that came back to my religious upbringing, and I really questioned a lot of that and had some disagreements with my dad about, the Catholic Church and stuff. But I still always came back to the spiritual, and he really helped instill that kind of spirituality in me, that there is a bigger picture, that there is more to this of what's going on. And although we did disagree a little bit in our assessment of the church, our theological models were kind of similar in more of a pantheism, that everything is God. God is a fundamental organizing principle within all existence. And that there is this bigger picture, and how I see it more as this bigger fractal picture. I could talk a lot about this, but that's not what we're really focused on here. This is really about my dad and his spiritual essence, and that's really what I want to get into. What was the spirit of my dad? What does it mean to be the spirit of someone? What was the spirit of Dan? Because that's who he was. He was more than just my dad. He was this entity that we know as Dan, or Danny, or Daniel, or, as some called him, Elvis. So I wore my Elvis shirt in honor of him for this video, because he loved Elvis. And he would even go by the name Elvis sometimes. Why? Because he could. I mean, why not, right? And so talking about his spirit, what does it mean to be the spirit of someone? So we could talk about what it means to be his soul. And what is he experiencing now? What is that soul entity experiencing now that he has moved on from this body on this earthly plane? And while that's a fascinating topic, one I'm very interested in, that's not really where I'm going with this. Because where I really want to go with this is, as far as we're concerned, as the entities who are not Dan Donnellon, what does it mean to be the spirit of Dan Donnellon? And what I mean by this is, what are the essential qualities that made him who he was? These sort of essential qualities that exist beyond any space-time construct. They're kind of like Plato's forms. They are beyond any one particular space-time construct, and they're what really makes him him. Because you could be in another universe, theoretically, a different space-time construct, and if you had all these qualities, it would be that same spirit. And so that spirit, that essence, is beyond any one particular space-time reality itself. There's a lot to get into the philosophy of all this, and that's part of the idea, and that's like Plato's forms, right? There are conceptual ideas, because that's all my cosmological model is, centered around the universe as a conscious entity, that it's more, it's called idealism, that everything is essentially the mind. The universe is a mind. And so that's why these essential constructs of what it means to be a person exist fundamentally in the mind of the universe, in the mind of God, beyond any one particular space-time reality. And that's why his spirit can always live on, because it exists beyond what we consider the physical world. There isn't just this one physical world where your body is and that's who you are. Your spirit exists conceptually as those essential qualities beyond any one space-time reality within existence. Okay. Maybe a lot more needed to explain there, but that's why this is a very complicated philosophical subject that has been the essence of debate and philosophy for thousands of years. Yeah. So, and let's say, so it's those essential qualities that really made him who he is that are his spirit. It's like if somebody came up to you and said they are Dan Donnellon, but they didn't have these essential qualities, they wouldn't really be him. It'd be like an imitation plate of spaghetti. An impasta. Yes, I wanted to make a silly joke like that because he loved silly jokes like that, you know? And that was really part of his essence. And so there's a myriad of qualities that we could really focus on when it comes to the essence of what it meant to be Dan Donnellon. And the one I think we have to start with, the one that I think almost everybody would agree is the most foundational aspect of his essence, would be his sense of humor. He was a very funny man. He actually was a stand-up comedian. Before he had kids, before he had a family, he did a lot of stand-up comedy. And professionally, he did a lot of gigs. He opened up for major concerts and different kind of festivals. He did all kinds of stuff. I mean, he didn't have Netflix specials because there wasn't Netflix around back then. No, but right, he was a stand-up comedian. It was his job. He was a professional comedian at that point. And then, he decided that he wanted to have a family and settle down, and he ended up he was a lawyer, and he was a successful lawyer, and so that worked out for him too. But it was he didn't just give up on comedy after he was done doing stand-up, right? He was always telling jokes, always making people laugh. He was always the life of the party. He was always an entertainer. He used to dress up like Elvis and put on these shows. It was hilarious. It was great. He was good at it too. And, that's an absolute part of his essence was his humor. It was just a pivotal part of who he was. He was a very funny man. And so when you're really talking about the essence of Dan Donnellon, you really have to start with his humor. And then I would say his loyalty. As I mentioned with the Bengals, he was an extremely loyal man. He never gave up on the team. Never said a bad word about him. He was just very loyal and dedicated to the Bengals and to everything he did, to his job, to his family especially. He was very loyal and dedicated to my mom, in their relationship. And that was another big part of who he was. He was a loyal and dedicated man with everything he did in terms of his religion, in terms of the church. He was very involved with the church. He didn't just go every Sunday, but especially when we were kids, he used to do the children's liturgy, which, was like a little separate room when the kids would go because, church is super boring for everyone, especially kids. So then they'd have these kids go in a little room separate, and then they'd have their kind of own little children's stuff, and it was a little more interactive and a little more entertaining for the kids. And my dad was great about that because he was a very entertaining man, and he loved to kind of combine his two favorite things, God and comedy, and he would kind of do that, entertain the kids while helping spread his spiritual message. And the other aspect I wanted to point out was also his compassion. He was very compassionate. And this also ties into his loyalty. And actually, that is the same one, because the other aspect I was going to point out was his brilliance. brilliance. He was an extremely smart man. Like I said, he went to law school, graduated, which I guess isn't easy. And not that anybody can't do it. You don't have to be that smart to get a professional degree. But he was a successful lawyer, and I really learned a lot from him. It wasn't until later in life I realized how much I actually learned from my dad. I just kind of took for granted all these kind of things he taught me growing up, and it's just kind of how the way that was. And then I realized as I got older how much, there were certain things I knew about that kind of other people didn't know or weren't taught, and that was because my dad instilled that knowledge in me and helped also develop certain critical thinking skills in me, which really fostered my career as a philosopher, to which I also question a lot of what I was raised with, but I think that's what a parent wants, right? They want to teach their kid how to think and not just what to think. And I think my dad did a great job of that. And so I think those kind of things right there, and call them like 4 things, his sense of humor, his loyalty, his compassion, and his brilliance were really just a few aspects of his essence, just a few points that I wanted to focus on, of what really were the essential qualities of Dan Donnellon, of my dad. And it's these essential qualities that were his spirit. And we can, that's like I was saying before, it's his spirit that is timeless. It's not bound within the time. These essential qualities are fundamental constructs, and they were all just embodied within him in the certain degrees that they were exhibited through him. But within his body, within his life, and within the construct of our spatio-temporal reality. But those constructs of what make his essence, of what made his spirit, aren't just only within our context of this one spatio-temporal reality. Not that we exist only in one spatio-temporal reality, but that's kind of a more complicated aspect to look at all this. So, of course, we don't need to go there. But that's my point, is those constructs exist beyond what we consider our spatio-temporal reality. That's what makes them eternal. Yeah. Infinite. Because they're not bound within just this one, what we perceive as this one reality. And that's why that's the important thing we can really focus on and move with us and keep with us, is that his spirit, his essence will always live on. And we can really focus on that and use that, because his living body may no longer be with us, but his spirit will always live on. And I know these things might seem cliche. Everybody thinks they're smart and funny and caring, right? But it was about how he exhibited these qualities. That's what really mattered. How he exhibited these qualities. And that's what made him his essence. That's what made his essence. That's what made his spirit. Are those how he exhibited those qualities. And that's what we can really carry on with us. And that's how we can carry on his spirit with us at all times. Because his spirit is eternal. His spirit won't go away. His living body may no longer be with us. But we can carry on his spirit at all times. And that's really what I wanted to focus on here, is what was the spirit of Dan Donnellon? What was the spirit of my dad? And how we can carry on that spirit with us always and forever. And I think that's the best way we can honor someone, is to carry on those essential qualities of them. All of the good things, I guess, right? Sure. And you can really try to live up to that and carry that with you. And, you go in there and you're like, I'm going to carry the spirit of Dan with me, and kind of imitate some of his personality. And then you kind of like channel that from the field a little bit. Sure. It's not a complicated topic to get into, but it's, you can bring that into you and exhibit that back out. Because these are the essential qualities that will always exist. His spirit will always live on. And you can carry that spirit with you by exhibiting those essential qualities to that person. That's kind of the basic idea of what I wanted to get at with my speech, which I very much deviated from. It was much more professional if I would have gone up and spoken in front of a church on it, but I wanted to make this YouTube video just to get some of those ideas out there. So hopefully, if you knew my dad or if you didn't, maybe this will help serve as either a memory of the true character and the spirit and the essence of who he was, or help introduce to you the spirit and the essence of who he was. Because he was a very important man to me, and I'm very sad now that he died. And that's what comforts me through it all, is that I can always live and channel that spirit and that essence within me. And that spirit and that essence of him will always live on. So I just hope everyone, can be comforted by those words and always try to live that spirit and live that essence of my dad, of Dan Donnellon with you. And you can. And that's what's so important. I need to wrap it up and just kind of figure out how to finish this. This wasn't a good way. I should have just ended it a while ago with something short and sweet that really kind of trails off and is like, oh, and now how am I going to do it? Now I just keep rambling on still. But I'm going to stop and I'm going to figure it out. And that's why we can all carry on the essence of Dan Donnellon wherever we go. Thank you.